Michio Kaku, welcome very, very much to Conversation.
My pleasure to be here.
Wonder if you might share with me a little bit of your own background, your own academic background and so forth, and maybe from that perspective we could talk some about, the human condition, but also from particularly looking at some of the energy requirements, the energy realities and ecological realities. But your own background, you took a degree at Harvard and so forth. Maybe just fill us in a little on your own background, if you would, please.
Well, my parents during World War II were incarcerated and put in concentration camps.
I'm terribly sorry.
But in 1946, when my parents were let out of the concentration camps, the children of the Japanese Americans had very little educational opportunity. However, I was always fascinated with the atomic bomb. I was always fascinated with nuclear energy. And in fact, when I was in high school, I was so enamored of this new technology that I built an atom smasher in my mom's garage. I assembled 300 pounds of transformer steel, got 22 miles of copper wire, and I assembled a 6 kilowatt, 20 kilogauss magnetic field, 2.3 million electron volt Betatron in my mom's garage.
Gee whiz.
And every time I plugged in the Betatron into the garage, it soaked up the entire output of the house. I would blow out all the circuit breakers in the house, all the lights would dim, and then my mother would just shake her head and
what
say
are we going
to
to do
herself,
with Michio?
she'd say, what are we going to do? Why couldn't I have a boy who plays basketball, baseball? Why can't he find a nice Japanese girl? Why does he have to build these gigantic machines in the garage?
Right. But you had this curiosity. Scientific curiosity, right?
That's right.
Mechanical application, right,
And because of that, Edward Teller, a very famous atomic scientist who helped to build the hydrogen bomb, took an interest in me. I was in the National Science Fair. My pictures was in the papers in California.
Still as a very young man.
Yeah, I was a very young guy, 16 years old.
Right.
And he took an interest in me for reasons I never quite understood till many years later. And he got me a 4-year scholarship to Harvard. And at Harvard, I began to hone my skills as a nuclear physicist. And I spent 4 more years at Berkeley getting my PhD.
Did you go to Harvard as a young man?
That's right, as an undergraduate.
How old were you when you went into Harvard?
Well, I was, 17 years old.
Yeah, right, okay.
From 1964 to 68.
Right.
And then from 68 to 72, I got my PhD at Berkeley.
I see.
Now, what I didn't know was that Edward Teller was essentially recruiting a bunch of young top-flight physicists from the West Coast to work on Star Wars, to work on third-generation hydrogen bombs, to work on the X-ray laser, the Excalibur, all these systems that got President Ronald Reagan enamored of this whole nuclear shield around the United States, energized by third-generation hydrogen bombs.
He was thinking of that far back.
Well, he wasn't thinking specifically about the Star Wars, but he knew that he was ostracized from the mainstream of the scientific community. And he also knows that young scientists, very young scientists, come up with all the creative ideas, like how to manufacture hydrogen bombs. A hydrogen bomb is like a watch. It's a very delicate device. It requires top talent, not hacks, to build these things. And he essentially recruited these things through the Hertz Engineering Scholarship. And there's also a book written about it called Star Warriors, written by a journalist for the New York Times, detailing how this scholarship, the same scholarship that got me into Harvard, essentially got young scientists to be funded. And then, of course, they went to the Livermore National Laboratory, where they then subsequently began to design third-generation hydrogen warheads that are the backbone of Reagan's Star Wars program.
Because when he was first in touch, and you were a very young man, the hydrogen, what was it, 54 that the hydrogen bomb first came in?
Around 52, 53.
Yeah, so he was in touch with you even before that, and he was probably, he spotted you as somebody up and coming who ought to be enlisted into this whole realm.
That's right, and people my age are essentially the ones who build hydrogen bombs now. As I said before, Edward Teller realized that it's young people who have all the ideas, not these older hacks with smocks and look like Einstein. Those are the people that have no more ideas. It's the young people who have these ideas.
Well, it's the young, even teenagers very often come with breakthroughs, an early 20-year-old and that kind of stuff.
That's right.
And you did your work at Harvard and Berkeley then?
That's right. I got my PhD in Berkeley in 1972.
And how long have you been at CUNY?
Well, I've been a professor since 1974.
Here in New York,
at the Graduate Center and also the City College.
And you're interested in physics, and you're interested in energy systems and the ecology, and you have a and a number of things. You have a rather comprehensive view of things. If I glean from our early conversation, you have a comprehensive overview.
That's right.
Of
one
science
of my main
and
concerns,
and so forth.
Right. One of my main concerns now, of course, is the environment. Okay. Coming from the whole question of the environment as a physicist now, looking at the degradation of our atmosphere, for example, the ozone depletion problem, the greenhouse effect, and then lastly, the question of what do we do about it? Can nuclear energy, for example, save us from the horrors of global warming and the greenhouse effect?
Or we were even talking a little bit before the camera started running about this theory about when did the human species first appear. I mean, if we begin to look at universe, we have you know, some sort of a view of the evolution of consciousness in the universe. There was consciousness before human consciousness appeared. There were
yeah, that's actually a raging debate in the scientific community.
Yeah,
I work on an area professionally now called the unified field theory.
Yes.
You know, Einstein, of course, gave us the atomic bomb, gave us the Big Bang, the black holes.
Yeah.
Those are the contributions of Einstein.
Yeah.
But he spent the last 30 years of his life on an unfinished dream that he failed. He blew it on the third try. And his theory was called the unified field theory, the theory of the universe. An equation 1 inch long that would explain everything. It would explain magnetism, electricity, the sun, the stars, the universe. It would explain the galaxies, the Big Bang, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Well, today, even though, of course, Einstein failed in the last 30 years of his life, today we think we have it. It is called the superstring theory. And I've even written a book for the educated layperson called Beyond Einstein, where I try to educate people about the latest theory of the universe, where we really think that there is a unifying principle by which the whole universe was created 15 billion years ago.
And what is the unifying principle by which the whole universe was created 15 billion years back?
Well, we think that 15 billion years ago, the universe started as basically nothing. It was a state of nothing. However, it was nothing in hyperspace. That it was just like in science fiction novels when you learn about hyperspace. The universe was a 10-dimensional universe back then. And the 10-dimensional universe. And it was unstable. And it cracked. And the cracking of the universe cracked into 4 dimensions and 6 dimensions. The 4-dimensional universe began to expand very rapidly, and that became the Big Bang. So in other words, we think we understand what happened before the bang, why there even was a bang at all. It's like the boiling of water. Water is superheated and little bubbles start to form and bubbles start to expand. We think that in the beginning was pure nothing, and out of nothing became a quantum leap to these small bubbles.
How did that occur?
Well, that's what I work on professionally. We want to fill in all the details. And as I said before, my book, Beyond Einstein, will hopefully explain it to the average layperson.
What are your thoughts on questions of spirituality and religious questions and religious explanations for these kind of things and so forth?
Well, there is a loophole in the quantum theory. As I said before, there's a quantum transition between nothing to these small bubbles. These bubbles start to expand.
Yeah, there's a big quantum leap from nothing to something.
Something, right. However, even within the quantum principle, and I'll work in the environment in a second.
Oh, we'll get to it.
Right? There is a loophole. And that is that in order to make sure that you know the state of an object, like whether or not an atom has decayed or not, or whether I'm even sitting here at the table, you have to make a measurement. And before you make a measurement, you don't really know whether the person is really there or not. There's a famous experiment of the Schrodinger's cat, which a lot of spiritualists have rediscovered in the last 10 years. If I have a box with a cat in it, and the cat is attached to a gun, and the gun is attached to a Geiger counter, and the Geiger counter is attached to uranium. You don't really know whether or not the uranium atom is going to decay, set off the Geiger counter. The Geiger counter is going to set off the gun and kill the cat. If the cat's in a box, the quantum mechanical description of the cat is I have to add the live cat and the dead cat. The cat is neither alive nor dead. The cat is represented by a mathematical wave function, the sum of a dead cat and a live cat. When you open the box, you make a measurement. At that point, the cat is dead. Now, the question is, before you open the box, is the cat dead or alive? And the answer is, and this will shock you when you hear about this.
I'll get ready. Let me hold on tight.
The fact is, quantum mechanics says the cat is neither dead nor alive.
Uncertainty.
Uncertainty.
Principle.
Right.
Heisenberg. No.
Right. Now, the question is, if you have to observe something to make sure the cat is either dead or alive, this means, of course, that somebody has to do the observing.
Yes, right.
Consciousness has to open the box. Now, the question is, therefore, was there consciousness before humans?
Oh, well, okay. Go ahead.
Einstein asked this question. He said, this is ridiculous. He didn't believe in the quantum theory. We now know this was, of course, Einstein's great mistake. And he had a very famous interaction with a guy named Abraham Peiss. They were walking down the street one day, and he said, look at the moon. And Abraham looked at the moon, and he said, I see the moon. And he said, do you believe that the moon exists only because a mouse can look at it. Mice have been on the Earth before humans.
That's right. Yeah,
mice have looked at the moon. And he said, do you think the moon sprung into existence just because a mouse looked at it? Now, Einstein was very puzzled about this. Now, of course, the average person hearing this for the first time thinks that scientists have finally gone wacko, that this, of course, is the end of physics. Scientists have finally gotten off the deep. They're mad. But actually, this has been tested experimentally. We have atoms. Atoms like cats that are neither dead nor alive. And before you look at the atom, you cannot tell whether they're dead or alive, whether they have decayed or whether they're still there or not. Okay? So in fact, the act of observing means the thing springs into existence. So in other words, did the dinosaurs really exist? Okay, now of course every scientist will say, every non-quantum scientist will say, of course the dinosaurs exist. We have bones.
We do.
Right? We have bones.
All over the place.
However, a quantum physicist, and this is all serious now, will say that there is a wave function of a world where there are no dinosaurs, or dinosaurs that are still alive, or there's a wave function of dinosaurs that have bones. And before you look at the bones, you can't tell that it is physically impossible to determine whether or not there were in fact dinosaurs. Okay? Now this, of course, means that physicists have to confront the question of consciousness. And that is rather uncomfortable. We physicists don't like to talk about consciousness, especially consciousness other than human consciousness. In other words, does the universe exist just because we look at it? Does the moon exist because a mouse looks at the moon? Do dinosaurs' bones exist because I look at the dinosaur bones? What about dinosaurs before humans? And the answer to this cosmic puzzle is nobody knows the answer.
There's an a priori mystery. You think it's an a priori mystery? Buckminster Fuller used to assume, maybe it was an earlier time, but he would assume a priori mystery in terms of the structure of what he used to sort of loosely call universal mind. I don't know.
Well, 20th century science is founded on the fact that the universe exists independent of humans. That is the foundation of 20th century science. We no longer believe in miracles. We no longer believe in angels and stuff like that. However, the quantum theory, and this is what bothered Einstein, brings us back to the question of who observes. Can you observe without humans? If so, does that mean that necessarily you have God, which some physicists say? Eugene Wigner, winner of the Nobel Prize, said that this essentially proves the existence of God. Or does it mean that you have Martians and extraterrestrial life out there? Nobody knows. It's an unsolved question of the quantum theory.
But he used to assume these a priori mysterious designs, a series of resonances that interaccommodate systems of energy. I don't know whether if you get into you're a physicist.
I'm a physicist.
You could talk about this.
I can talk about these
so
things,
that you have a resonancy between in subatomic physics. There's a resonancy that interaccommodates systems.
Well,
is there a resonancy? Is it right to call it a resonancy between electrons and protons and so forth, or a resonancy, something more than the sum of the parts, or a synergy more than the sum of the parts?
Well, the basic equations of atomic physics are known. Okay, they were written down in 1925 by Erwin Schrödinger, for which he won the Nobel Prize. The basic interaction of light was worked out by James Clerk Maxwell over 100 years ago, around 1860. So the basic resonances, as you call it, are very well understood. The only thing we don't understand is the philosophical underpinnings of why quantum mechanics works so well. There's no known violation to quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics is the physics of the atom. There are no known violations of this principle.
And that there's that all of matter, all of energy, that we're all of a system. We're all of a system in terms of life and on this earth or in this universe. We're all of a system. And if we see a sort of unified system of which we are a part, and we would look at the evolution of biological. Is there any way of gauging some sort of a purpose to biological evolutionary functioning
take a look
on Earth?
at the evolution.
Is it any any point in seeing anything like an anti-entropic or what Fuller used to call syntropic kind of mechanism that we can discern within the biological evolutionary process of which humanity is a part? Maybe apexing that process. Any way in which we can get any sense of human purpose in an epistemological or ontological sense in this void of the universe that we can get out of, that science can contribute to these philosophical things. Where does it fit in terms of, you know what I'm saying?
Well, let me try to answer this question. You see, when physicists interact with philosophers and social scientists, right? Philosophers and social scientists talk about purpose. They ask the question of why. Why does things happen? Is there a purpose?
Most people at an existential level.
Most physicists work with equations. I work with equations. I manipulate equations on my computer, in my head. This is how I function. I work in a world of equations. We ask the question, how? Okay. Now, ultimately, people like myself who ask the question, how did the bang take place? How did 10-dimensional hyperspace break down to our 4-dimensional universe? Confront the question of why. Now let me try to answer the question of why, and then I'll work into the question of the environment.
That's what we want to bring it into.
You see, 12,000 years ago, there was a very important event that happened in the history of Homo sapiens. 12,000 years ago, we humans were essentially small bands of cave dwellers in the Ice Age. Because of the Ice Age, progress had reduced Homo sapiens to the level of animals. We were almost indistinguishable from animals. The way we lived, the way we foraged for food, the way we hunted. We had no civilization to speak of.
Well, we had no agriculture before the Neolithic development.
Right. Now, what happened 12,000 years ago, an absolutely stupendous event took place 12,000 years ago. The Ice Age ended. And with the melting of the ice, it meant that humans no longer had to follow the deer, follow the bears. It meant that humans could plant seeds, and coming back a year later, these seeds would sprout. And with that, agriculture developed.
That's interesting. I'd never thought of it that way.
That's right. Agriculture was the turning point in human evolution.
Oh, no question.
Absolutely the turning point. With agriculture, it meant that you didn't have to follow the deer. It meant you could sit down and build a village. Villages didn't really exist before then. They were huts, basically.
Oh, yeah, right.
With the coming of villages came cities.
Well,
cities
eventually, it
then,
took a time,
of course, could be supported by agriculture. With large-scale agriculture, you could support not just a tribe of 10, 50 people. You could support a city of 10,000, 20,000 people. With the coming of cities became division of labor. And with the division of labor came, unfortunately, slavery.
It did,
where humans subjugated other humans. You can't have slavery when you are in bands of only 10 people foraging for deer. You can have slavery if your population develops to 10,000, 20,000, Then became, of course, civilization with the harnessing of energy,
They had even mastodons. They had mastodons and great beasts.
That's right. And basically
10, 12,000 years ago.
That's right. Basically, one of the reasons why they no longer exist, why mammoths and mastodons no longer exist, is probably because of humans.
Well, to a degree. They used to run them over cliffs and into bogs.
Humans probably wiped out the early mastodons.
Yeah, but there was also a climate change. But also, we were talking earlier that there's this theory of Eve, the mitochondrial DNA, that humanity got started 200,000 years ago, perhaps.
Perhaps, right. It turns out that by looking at the rate of genetic mutation, you can actually look back on a scale not just of 12,000 years, but on the scale of hundreds of thousands of years, looking at the blood of chimpanzees and humans, that our DNA is 99% equivalent. There's very little separating us from a chimpanzee from a molecular level. Now, the question is, when the Ice Age melted 12,000 years ago, what was the temperature change difference? It was only 9-degree difference. A 9-degree difference changed the course of human evolution. From a question of us foraging for food in small bands, chasing after the migration of deer, to building space rockets that could take us to Venus and Neptune. The only thing separating us from animals is 9 degrees.
9 degrees.
9 degrees.
That's where that comes from?
9 degrees. Now, the question is, now that we are heating up the atmosphere with carbon dioxide, the latest projections that I've seen is that in the early of the next century, we will heat the atmosphere to perhaps 4 to 9 degrees because of carbon dioxide being pumped into the atmosphere.
By when?
Probably by the year 2030.
Measured against what year?
Measured against 1980.
Against 1980. Wow.
Right.
In other words, late.
In other words, we're talking about within the lifetime of many people that are watching this TV program.
Yes, indeed,
The fact that there will be catastrophic changes in the atmosphere, first in the ozone layer, and second of all in the greenhouse effect, catastrophic changes that, of course, created civilization, that could also destroy civilization.
Well, that's what I wanted to do, in a certain sense, ask you, but I was trying to get a beginning of a loop of 200,000 years ago that Homo sapiens sapien apparently appeared in the evolution of consciousness, such as it has been on the Earth. And we're all descended from one person, as it seems. We've gone through these changes, and we come to the end of 10,000 generations, and we seem to have crossed or I wonder if we have crossed yet. The technology and the extension of the technology, which is an extension, technology is an extension of consciousness, in a certain sense, into the environment in which it's different than what is given, much of that has been destructive in its capability. In fact, a lot of the leading edge of the research has been destructive. Have we reached a point yet, do you think, where if it were unleashed, just theoretically, if it were unleashed, we could render the habitat of the Earth, just at this level, say weaponry level, we could render the habitat of the Earth incapable of the continuation of our species?
Oh, easily. All you have to do is...
You say that easily?
All you have to do is put our nuclear arsenal on the South Pole and detonate the South Pole and melt it. We have the capability of melting. We have the capability of altering the entire ecostructure of the planet with our hydrogen bombs.
With the hydrogen bombs, we could make it so
we could melt the polar ice caps. I don't suggest we do such a horrible thing.
That actually could happen from carbon dioxide. And
that's right. Global warming
could do that. But that these weapons of destruction, that if they were unleashed, it could be done by one person in an interlinking geopolitical world and so forth, that we have the ability to destroy a context wherein our species can continue, which began 200,000 years ago.
That's
right.
right.
We couldn't do it in the Second War. We were trying as hard as we were.
That's
we
right.
were protected
when George Bush gets on an airplane,
but it's something existentially new in the universe. I mean,
that's right. There's been a sea change in human evolution within the last several decades,
or cosmic evolution, or biological evolution.
When George Bush gets on an airplane, he brings behind him. Watch the newscasts. Right behind him, there's a Secret Service man with a bag. It's called the football.
Yeah.
Inside the football, of course, are all the codes.
Yeah.
The codes are for PSYOP 7.
Yeah.
PSYOP 7 is a single integrated operational plan which will unleash Armageddon. He has the ability to destroy all life on this planet. Same thing with Gorbachev.
No.
During the coup, for example, the question was, where is the Soviet football?
Yeah.
The Soviet football follows Gorbachev,
Yeah.
and during the coup, people asked, where is that football? Now, the point is has been a sea change in human evolution for two reasons.
He surely can't destroy life. I mean, life is a much more precious
itself may not be destroyed.
In universe.
Even asteroids were not able to destroy.
There are life forms at the bottom of the ocean.
That's right.
There are worms that even don't use photosynthesis.
Humans
we're not going to destroy life.
Yeah, humans may be an evolutionary dead end if we were to change the environment.
We may be.
Right. Now, look at it from a physicist's point of view.
Yeah.
We physicists have looked at life in outer space to see whether there's intelligent life just like ours that have evolved in the same way. We've now taken it out to 100 light years. Within 100 light year, a sphere of a radius 100 light years around the planet Earth, we've looked at all the stars within that 100 light years that are capable of supporting intelligent life, looking for radio signals, and we see nothing. However, there is an astronomer, Frank Drake, who wrote an equation called Drake's equation that predicts that within our galaxy there should be tens of thousands of planets capable of sustaining intelligent life. In which case, we should see them. We should be encountering other civilizations, except we see nothing. There's just dead vacuum out to 100 light years. And there's a theory as to why we don't see things out there. And that is that when intelligent life develops from the swamp, eventually they rise to the point of becoming, like you said, 200,000 years ago, becoming modern man, modern women, so on and so forth, intelligent life. But then they reach a point where they discover element 92.
What is that?
That's uranium.
Oh, uranium.
They go up the scale, systematically go up the scale until they hit 92, uranium. And then they also reach the point where they begin to discover hydrocarbon chemistry. Now, with hydrocarbon chemistry becomes plastics, oil, pollution. With element 92 comes the ability to melt your polar ice caps if you feel like it, to create a darkening of the atmosphere with a nuclear winter, to annihilate huge chunks of civilization. So there are two twin threats. At a certain point in the evolution of every civilization, they will eventually hit element 92. They will eventually manipulate hydrocarbon chemistry. With that, the ability to either blow yourself apart or either pollute yourself to death. We are now entering that threshold. In other words, for the first time in human evolution, within the last 4 decades, we have attained a crossroads whereby we now have the capability of destroying human life on this planet.
Now that is a we could have lived in the 12th century or 16th.
And we would not have had the ability.
We would have been protected in our own impotence, in a certain sense, as we were moving toward this point to which you and I sit and talk now.
That's
I mean,
right.
things were moving so slowly.
During the 12th century, they had the Black Plague. The Black Plague wiped out approximately a third of Europe.
Yeah.
A third of Europe did not wipe out all of Europe, only a third of Europe.
Or it didn't stop the species.
It didn't stop the species. However, today, because we do have hydrocarbon chemistry, because we do have element 92, uranium, we do have the ability to perhaps follow the path of other dead planets that are out there.
Yeah, right.
If the work of Frank Drake is correct, it means potentially there could be thousands of dead planets out there that did not negotiate pollution, global pollution like the greenhouse effect, and the global pollution like the depletion of the ozone layer, and did not negotiate the question of nuclear weapons.
Yeah, there was a consciousness, Australopithecine and other kinds of things before human consciousness, and one would hope, if it continues. I have a son, if I may, bright young man. He studies dolphins. He thinks that we're a dead end. He thinks the dolphins...
We are an evolutionary dead end.
We are
it's conceivable.
No, he does. He thinks that we're hopelessly barbarous and we're flawed. The cetaceans will be are the principal carriers of consciousness, or the leading edge of consciousness in this part of the universe, and so forth, and that we're going to destroy ourselves, which is an existentially difficult kind of situation to live with, if you like human beings and so forth. But we're definitely at a time when, after 200,000 years of evolution, we're at a point of quantum transformation.
That's right. We're at perhaps the most, well, the first most important transition was 12,000 years ago when civilization began.
Well, the first might be 200,000 years ago when we first appeared.
The first one was 200,000 years ago when we appeared.
Yes.
The next one was 12,000 years ago when the ice melted and civilization began.
Yeah.
The next transition...
Agriculture and then civilization.
Agriculture. Yeah. The next transition was 300 years ago when machines were discovered. Steam, basically. Steam power, and then oil fueled the Industrial Revolution.
Right.
We're now entering, in some sense, the fourth major transition point in the evolution of the human species, and that is the ability to self-destruct.
Yeah, the ability to self-destruct, and and I guess maybe from that perspective, one to try to draw off from it in a systems kind of way, or see it as sort of like a gestation. We've been we might be able to say we've been gestating for 200,000 years, and we may be that we're going to be stillborn, or we're going to be aborted, or we're going to create our own,
in that sense, an evolutionary dead end.
Or it could be possibly that we're at a point where, if one were to try and find the obverse side, I think that's what I was getting at in a certain sense, if you were to find, and we inherit, James Joyce said, Daedalus say, I use it all the time, folks, excuse me in the audience, but it's history is a nightmare from which we're attempting to awaken. And that if we could find our way through to where there could be something other than the inherited institutions and situations that we've come out of historically, battling over scarce resources, battling over other kinds of power relationships, traditional geopolitical thinking that we've inherited from a past, it may be we're coming into a technologically augmented situation that could be, in a certain sense, liberating us from the kinds of struggles that we've been involved in, if you can understand what I mean.
Yeah, I think that
the bad qualitative transformation.
The bad news is that we've reached this turning point where we have the ability to self-destruct. However, the good aspect of it is that nations are now at a point where mutual cooperation on the scale of 90 nations signing a treaty just last year to ban CFCs that destroy the ozone layer, that is a tremendous turning point in the evolution of the planet. In other words, I don't believe in George Bush's New World Order. In other words, America, the great superpower, America, the great, and so on and so forth. I believe that the New World Order will be a new environmental order. That nations of the world suddenly realize that they're going to get wiped out too if the atmosphere changes. Their growing areas will turn into desert. We sit on top of the food chain. We could be toppled very easily from the top of the food chain if algae starts to be disrupted by ultraviolet light. If the temperatures start to heat up so that farm animals can't reproduce, and all sorts of horrible things happen. 90 nations signed a treaty in the 1990 stating that they will unilaterally, multilaterally, limit the production of chlorofluorocarbons.
Was that in Montreal? Was that the Treaty
of
Montreal?
The 87 Montreal Treaty was only a banning of half of the CFC production by the year 2000. Then it turns out that the ozone layer is depleting much more rapidly than expected. In the last decade, over the United States now, not over the South Pole, but over the United States, there has been a 4 to 5% depletion over the United States. That is catastrophic. We are witnessing the collapse of the ozone layer.
In the temperate region,
Right. In the next decade, it'll probably be another 5, perhaps 10% depleted. So we're talking about, by the year 2020, the ozone layer disintegrating, perhaps a quarter of it, perhaps a third of it disintegrating by the year 2020.
Explain a little bit ozone layer, what it is, what's happening, what causes it.
You see, life on Earth is about 3 billion years old, and about 3 billion years ago, something very important happened, and that is that the ultraviolet radiation came down on the Earth, created ozone, and then ozone then shut off more ultraviolet radiation. That meant that harmful ultraviolet radiation could not rain down on the Earth and mess up the evolution of DNA molecules. If the ozone layer had never existed, we would not be in this room talking about it. Our molecules would be dispersed as random hydrocarbons around the planet. There would have been no life, because life, as soon as it was created, would have been destroyed by ultraviolet and by X-rays raining down from the sun. If we ruin this protective shield over the United States, over the rest of the planet,
it made evolution possible then, or the biological
It made evolution possible about 3 billion years ago. That's right. It started the whole process. In other words, what started evolution was probably harmful X-rays mushing up the molecules in the oceans. But once DNA starts, it's very fragile. You have to protect it. The ozone layer then formed, shielding these very primitive molecules from being disrupted by the harmful X-rays and ozone, ultraviolet radiation. So the ozone layer is our shield that protects all life on the planet Earth. However, 5% of it has now disintegrated over the United States, leading to perhaps 200,000 more fatal skin cancers over the next 50 years, according to the Environmental Protection Agency.
Just within the context of what's already been done.
Yeah, already been done.
Now, is it clear that it's these fluorocarbons that does this? Do we clearly understand what causes this?
The chemistry was predicted even before the ozone depletion over the polar ice caps were discovered. It's a very complicated process, but about 10, 15 years ago, chemists even then predicted that the chlorine atom will bind to O3 minus, which is ozone, and ruin the existence of O3 minus, will deplete O3 minus, which is ozone. And then when the hole over the South Pole was discovered by satellite, that sent off alarm bells all over the world. And now 90 nations have signed a revised Montreal Treaty in 1990 stating that no longer a 50% cut, a total ban on CFCs on the industrialized nations by the year 2000 and by the year 2010 for the developing nations. This is unprecedented. We've never seen 90 nations agree on anything. You put 90 nations together, all they do is bicker about resources and property claims and
they still do a lot of that.
They still do
a lot of that, unfortunately.
But this is the first time we've seen global cooperation on that scale.
Yeah, because there's a universally perceived threat here. You know.
That's right.
We're clearly agreed on what it is that's causing this depletion. I mean,
almost
are there other factors other than this? Is this
there are other chemicals besides CFC. However, CFC, like methane, for example, and other methyl compounds. However, CFC is perhaps the most concentrated, that one molecule of CFC will interact with thousands of other molecules and essentially create depletion on a very rapid scale. But there are other molecules that will do it.
Isn't methane created through organic processes of...
decaying swamps, for example, will of course also heat up the atmosphere and create the opposite effect, that is the greenhouse effect. Instead of destroying the ozone layer, it creates a carbon dioxide layer. And the carbon dioxide layer could then heat up the planet. And like I said before, 9 degrees is all that separates us from the animals.
Oh, the 9 degrees is what separated us from the temperature. You
think of 12,000 years ago.
Of 12,000 years ago. There was a 9-degree increase in temperature from 12,000 years ago. But of course, there have been the ice ages, which had gone more or less in that through time.
That's right. In other words, the Bush administration has long said that it's just a theory that carbon dioxide levels and temperatures fluctuate in synchronization. We now have the proof. We have the smoking gun. It turns out if you go to Greenland, the ice sheet over Greenland has been stable for several 100,000 years. The ice has trapped molecules of air of hundreds of thousands of years ago. We physicists have gone to Greenland and taken ice cores, drilled hundreds of feet right into the ice sheet to capture the atmosphere of 160,000 years ago. We now know what the atmosphere looked like 160,000 years ago, right on the planet Earth. We plotted carbon dioxide levels and temperatures, and we see an exact synchronization. In fact, I even brought the chart with me. And if you look at the chart, you'll see that carbon dioxide levels rise and fall along with temperatures. This is the smoking gun. This is the thing that George Bush says, it doesn't exist, it's a theory, it's a myth. Why worry about the greenhouse effect? In fact, there was a cartoon I saw of George Bush. He was in the desert with no water, and the sun was baking down on George Bush, and he was crawling for any kind of aid. And as George Bush was crawling in the desert, he said, more study, more study. We must have more study. I think we've had enough study. It shows, first of all, the ice cores give us the smoking gun. Carbon dioxide levels are directly related now to temperature changes. And carbon dioxide levels are now the highest they have been in 100,000 years.
These patterns in the ice ages that went before the end of the Pleistocene, the ice ages and so forth, were going on long before there was any technology or automobiles or anything else. There was a naturally assuming pattern.
The normal decay of plants, for example, giving off methane, will of course also set off the greenhouse effect to some degree. Carbon dioxide is caused by
depletion. Methane will also. I heard you say methane.
To some degree, right? Mainly the CFCs, the chlorofluorocarbons, right? Because there are two effects we're talking about. One, of course, is ozone depletion, and the other one is the carbon dioxide levels coming from internal combustion engine, the burning of oil, basically.
I guess what I was saying is these temperature changes had occurred throughout the evolution, the geologic evolution.
Geologically, and we have speeded it up. In other words, we have cut about 100,000 years off the rate of warming of the planet Earth. The planet Earth, of course, would have warmed anyway, okay, perhaps. We have essentially accelerated the natural process in the planet Earth by tens of thousands to perhaps 100,000 years.
But it seems to me, if I may, this ozone depletion is something new.
The ozone depletion is new in the sense that over 3 billion years now.
Yes,
okay,
that's a longer
for the first time in 3 billion years, we now have the potential of destroying the life-giving ozone shield around the Earth. As far as carbon dioxide is concerned, there have been ice ages in the past. There also have been times when there have been enormous heating. The dinosaurs lived in a time when the Earth was much hotter than it is today, for example. It's gone through that. However, we may very well go the way of the dinosaurs. We're not suited to live in the environment of the dinosaurs. The dinosaurs were. Lizards may take over if there is a global warming of the planet Earth, for example. Lizards like warm temperatures. Humans, because we are warm-blooded, we regulate our own temperatures to be 98.6 degrees. We don't like hot temperatures.
They had a piece in the Times here. The rats are very able to handle ultraviolet light in terms of vision and so forth.
That's right. In fact, bees, for example, are ill-equipped to handle changes in ultraviolet radiation. And bees, of course, pollinate the crops in the United States. And with the loss of the ozone layer becomes the potential loss of bees, which use ultraviolet to home in on the sun.
Now, so we have two things, ozone depletion and we have the greenhouse effect and the buildup of carbon dioxide.
And both of us can kill us by the year 2020, 2030.
Yeah, they're separate processes. They're not interconnected.
There's some interconnection in the sense that, for example, when a volcano erupts, it cools the atmosphere to a degree. And, methane, for example, certain chemicals can cut both ways. But we know that, like, for example, during the Iraqi war, the Gulf War, tremendous amounts of several 100,000 tons of soot was sent into the air, caused a cooling effect. So we know that volcanoes and the burning of the Kuwaiti oil fields will drop temperatures 20 degrees, for example. Okay, and that causes a net cooling effect.
There locally.
Locally.
We cut off the sun. Right.
But a nuclear winter will also, of course, globally cool the Earth. However, carbon dioxide over the long term will heat up the Earth to the point where we have essentially speeded up the natural temperature changes of the Earth by several million times.
In a certain sense, if I may, both seem bad. One seems quantitative, one seems qualitative. That ozone depletion seems to me to be really messing with nature in a way that is
over a 3 billion year time scale now, destroying something that's been there for 3 billion years.
And the ozone layer, which is absolutely essential to life itself, to do that. We've put these bans on it now. How much damage has been done? Can that damage be can we regain the right level, can we repair that damage?
Okay, let me try to answer that question.
What is the projection if we don't do? What are some of the projections? I mean, concentrating on this ozone thing, if we could for a second.
Okay. First of all, the depletion over not just the South Pole, but over the United States, okay, is about 5% since 1978. That is 21 times faster than previously expected, okay? So we're talking about a virtual collapse of the ozone layer, not over penguins, but over the United States, leading to a 10% increase in skin cancers just over the last 10 years, causing 200,000 more skin cancers over the next 50 years, causing essentially several 100,000 non-fatal skin cancers over the next 50 years. I mean 12 million, I'm sorry, 12 million non-fatal skin cancers over the next 50 years, 200,000 fatal skin cancers above projections over the next 50 years. Now this is the United States now. We're talking about the destruction of farm animals, any animal that lives outside, that looks up, bees that use the sun to home in on their crops. The food chain, algae. We're now seeing a depletion of algae in the South Pole.
Good grief.
6 to 8% depletion of algae. Algae is the bottom of the food chain. Farm animals are higher up on the food chain. We sit at the top of the food chain. It's very easy to topple us from the food chain because of the destruction of the ozone. Now, some people have suggested cures for these things. Okay? However, none of these cures make any sense. Some people have suggested seeding the Antarctic. However, you can calculate on the back of the envelope. You're talking about bankrupting the gross national product of a nation in order to get enough materials to reseed ozone over the South Pole.
That, in a certain sense, you went quickly there, if I may, is that's what I was asking you. Is this repairable? Can we repair it by reverse that process of ozone depletion, or once depleted, always depleted? 5% loss is a loss forever. Can it be made? Can something be done, by way of repairing that?
Yeah. The bad news is that CFC molecules, especially the chlorine, stays in the atmosphere for decades. Once it's up there for a lawful long time. In other words, the CFCs that we've already put up there up to this year is sufficient to cause degradation over the next several decades, just what we've already put in. And in 10 years' time, we hope to ban CFCs in the industrialized nations.
And meanwhile, we're going to be continuing as we have.
That's right.
So there's going to be a continued depletion.
That's right, a rapid acceleration depletion. So I predict that by the year 2020, there could be as much as a third collapse of the ozone layer over the planet Earth. That is catastrophic.
Yeah, that is catastrophic. That would be catastrophic, quite literally, as you say it. The effects of that would be not the. That wouldn't be the. What would be the catastrophic effects of a 30?
The Bush administration would like to have us believe that.
Why was it over Antarctica? Why was it over North America? Was it over Europe? Has it been over Australia?
Yeah, the depletion over the higher latitudes is even worse. Leningrad, the depletion is 8% since 1978 over Leningrad. Sweden, the depletion has been 8%. We're lower on the scale, so it's only been 5% over the United States, but it's been higher. 8% over Leningrad, 8% over Sweden is what the depletion has been, as measured by satellite, not by computer.
Will this have anything to do with the human activities of the land under which these depletions occur?
Definitely. It's going to affect agriculture. It's going to affect bees and insects, birds.
Is there a cause and effect between what goes on under where these depletions, like you said, under the United States? Is it something that happened in the United States that caused there to be a depletion, or is it a mixture? The atmosphere is mixing in it?
The reason why it came over the Antarctic is that these are very complex chemical reactions that are heat sensitive. And over the Atlantic, you have a lot of cold air masses there. And it turns out that because of the coldness, it accelerated the depletion of ozone over the South Pole. Now, over the North Pole, a smaller effect has taken place over the North Pole. And we, because we are in the northern hemisphere, have experienced this depletion. But as you go into Canada, as you get even closer to the North Pole, it's much higher. Leningrad is higher up than the United States, most of the United States. That's why Leningrad has 8% depletion, according to the United Nations. Sweden is also higher up, closer to the North Pole, and that's why it's been 8% over Sweden.
This is a matter of a very serious consequence.
You're talking about a collapse. I'm not just talking about putting on sunglasses. That's what John Sununu would have had us believe, is you just put on sunglasses. Birds can't put on sunglasses. Bees can't put on sunglasses. Farm animals, algae, they can't put on sunglasses. You're talking about destroying the food chain.
Yeah. Now, back again to the original question. This can't be reversed, this depletion?
Okay, the reversal by human intervention, that is by seeding the clouds.
What we can do,
that is probably outrageously expensive. What we have to do is simply ban CFCs, not by the year 2000, but even earlier. But nations, of course, their gross national product is hooked to CFCs. The most common CFC is Freon gas. We use Freon gas in refrigerators and air conditioners, right?
Does that mean that's in most of the refrigerators in our homes have this stuff?
That's right. Freon is a remarkable chemical.
And does it, as it is in the refrigerator, does it contribute to this problem, the use of that? Or is it only if it leaks?
It leaks, and of course when you get rid of your refrigerator, it gets smashed up and the ozone leaks into the atmosphere.
If the refrigerator is not smashed up and it doesn't leak into the atmosphere, that Freon, does it still contribute to that?
If you can contain it, if you can contain the Freon, then of course it would be less contribution. However,
don't you think we ought to be very carefully taking care of old refrigerators?
It costs money. It's only money.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and George Bush would rather spend money on third-generation hydrogen warheads to defeat a nation that no longer exists, and would rather have, you know, hydrogen weapons in West Germany attack targets in East Germany, when of course there's only one country, Germany now. Billions of dollars are spent trying to destroy East Germany.
No, but in the face of this, honestly, I mean, to have somebody go and take an old refrigerator and throw it in a landfill where it's going to get crushed so the Freon can get into the atmosphere, that could be pretty easily taken care of. I mean, if refrigeration is the major thing, there could be a place where you could put an old refrigerator, and you know, if I'm saying,
right. But you see, that's what has to be done. First, you have to limit the production of CFCs. You have to have the industrial establishment restrict the emissions of CFCs in the atmosphere, and you have to make sure that the CFCs that already exist, the Freon gas in our air conditioners, refrigerators, that is disposed of correctly rather than being put into landfills and whatever, and then it leaks right into the atmosphere.
Yeah, that would see a main priority, would seem to me, to make sure it's disposed of. Because
but you see, that's not Bush's priority.
No, it's not.
You know, and I know it's a priority, right? Tell that to John Sununu, the nuclear engineer.
But I mean, it's a relatively small thing. It wouldn't be a large thing for people to do. Refrigerator is a big thing, you know.
Yeah, but to limit the industrial production for Dow Chemical and DuPont, to limit CFCs would cost them tens of billions of dollars.
It would. Right.
You realize that before the invention of the refrigerator, all foods would rot. The average human on this planet has eaten rotten food ever since 2 million years ago when we first began to walk on the surface of the earth. Rotten food is the most common taste that Homo sapiens have tasted. That's why refrigeration is so important. Okay. However, refrigeration is also killing us, and killing all life on the planet Earth if the ozone layer collapses.
Yeah, and that has to be absolutely guarded against.
Right.
You know.
And you see, John Sununu's point of view, or his point of view, was that nuclear energy will, of course, save us from all these catastrophic problems. The nuclear energy, we need a nuclear power plant in every backyard, and that'll save us. However, I don't believe that nuclear energy, even though John Sununu claims to have had a nuclear engineering training, I don't think that nuclear energy is the way to go. First of all, even if you were to multiply by 10 the number of nuclear power plants in the United States, it would not make a dent on carbon dioxide production.
Okay, now we're going to deal with the carbon dioxide thing, right?
Right,
okay,
which is also a problem, and also by the year 2020, 2030 will, of course, affect the food chain and affect lifestyles on the planet.
Yeah.
The United States, of course, we have a gigantic food basket. The bread basket, Kansas, the wheat belt, the corn belt. That has been one of the main reasons why we can thumb our noses at the Soviets, because we have this gigantic bread basket.
Yeah.
By the year 2020, there may not be a bread basket. It may be a dust bowl like it was in the 1930s. California, one of the largest bread baskets on the planet, could be wiped out as an agricultural center. Cities like New York City could be under 10 feet of water.
Yeah.
You realize the studio that we're in right now could be under 4 feet of water is the projection for New York City.
Well, not us, because we're on the fourth floor.
We're on the fourth floor. However, the bottom floor may have 4 feet more of water. New York City being right at sea level.
Yeah, I understand.
New Orleans is actually, parts of New Orleans is below sea level. We're talking about coastal cities being flooded like San Francisco if the polar ice caps begin to melt.
Do we have a knowledge base, technological or scientific knowledge base by which there could be replacement technologies, or do we have the technological solutions to these things, but it's a matter of political will and financing capability for us to utilize appropriate technologies that we do know about, or do we still have to learn about appropriate technologies that can replace those which have so polluted our environment, but have also added to the increased living standard of the human population, and there's a third world waiting, trying to live better.
It all boils down to the almighty dollar. We have the means. We don't have the will. You realize
we
that
have the technological means.
We have the means. We don't have the will. Unfortunately, it's like a driver driving in a car getting all of a sudden very sleepy, and it takes a near miss to wake up that person, right? That's civilization. Civilization is falling asleep when it comes to these the catastrophic depletion of the ozone layer and the greenhouse effect. And it may take a near miss. The problem is, even after we wake up, it may be too late.
It's like they have these programs recently about the tremendous damage of a lack of neonatal care, or the very early infants going to or the young people is going to result in huge prison costs. But they can't put the costs on up at the upfront, and then they get tremendous costs in prison costs and other kinds of.
You pay for it later. You pay for it now, or you pay for it later, but you pay 10 times more later.
And we don't have a system in our own way of thinking that allows us to have financing or a financing capability that allows us to do what it is we technologically know or scientifically know we're capable of doing. So it's almost built-in schizophrenia in terms of people who are of concern now as we approach this this era of crisis in terms of the human species, in terms of the broader evolution of events as we spoke earlier.
Right. The problem is that the engine of the Industrial Revolution has been profits. There's no profit to be made to restrict the ozone layer. There's no profit to be made to restrict the greenhouse effect. And George Bush, because he's very keenly attuned to the oil industry, the oil industry, as you know, is one of the first polluters creating this effect. Our president is a former oil company president. He thinks like an oil company president because he was the president of the Zapata Offshore Oil and Drilling Company. And oil men like the greenhouse effect, because the greenhouse effect is caused by oil, caused by the internal combustion engine.
And we've inherited, and things have moved so quickly. The Industrial Revolution, we look 200,000 years. If it isn't, if all these lines aren't exponential, they're darn near exponential as we go up. And as we reach this point, maybe of it's been like gestating for 200,000 years, and we're going to go into a new cooperative, liberated way of being where the technology could really come to the service of the human community and allow us all to maximize our potential, which historically we've never been able to do. We've lived in a jungle of scarcity-motivated thinking and so forth. We may be superseding that. We may be coming into a new way of being that would allow us to resonate in universe with a consciousness transcendent to what we have been.
By necessity.
By necessity?
By necessity, as nations realize that their economy is falling apart because their agriculture is falling apart, because their bread baskets are no longer producing food, because there's no more bees, there's no more pigs, there's no more deer, there's no more crops, there's no more birds, there's no more algae, there's no more fish. At that point, it may be too late.
But we may be at that with the crisis point that we have to be woken up and find new ways of operating, cooperative ways that are operating, that are appropriate in terms of the evolution of this new conscious capability, the microprocessors, so many miracles of technology and ability to bring life support to the citizenry within an ecologically appropriate context. We don't have financing techniques. We have historically inherited institutions don't allow us to do what we're capable of doing. And it may be, hopefully, in a positive scene, that we're not going to destroy the species. We're going to find some liberated new way of being in this universe and so forth. It would be that these warnings, this ozone depletion, may be the kind of warnings that are going to wake us up to, in terms of a larger cosmic plan, going to wake us up to make the kind of changes that are needed, which would be part of a positive scenario as we begin to look ahead, do you think?
There's a possibility. However,
it's like
the problem is national sovereignty. We're talking about global problems being dealt with a bunch of children. These children want to protect their own turf, right? The United States is perhaps the most egregious violator of this because which nation has been the main stumbling block in the restriction of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere? It's the United States. And the reason for that is the United States contributes 1/4. We are the largest producer of carbon dioxide on the planet Earth because our gross national product is about 1/4 of the gross national product of the planet Earth.
Well, as you and I, as citizens of the United States, should do all we possibly can to try and alert the people of our country, and perhaps to move away from some of the arrogance and greed and other things that motivate too much.
That's right. The solution to the problem is democracy. If the American public were to be informed of the fact that in the future we're no longer going to be able to thumb our nose at the rest of the world as the corn belt, the wheat belt, and the agribusiness in California disintegrates, then maybe they'll start to vote in politicians who will take the long-term viewpoint rather than the short-term viewpoint of what's in it for me, you know, electing the best politicians that money can buy. We're talking about long-term commitment to restricting carbon dioxide, a commitment that our president refuses to make because he's a former oilman, because he has interest in big oil. Exxon has been one of the main stumbling blocks in the question of restricting carbon dioxide content. Even Margaret Thatcher, when she was at the last meeting, Margaret Thatcher scolded the United States, saying, "What's wrong with you? The whole world understands that you are the bottleneck." Okay, and George Bush's response was, "More study."
Yeah, right. More study. Well, they need more study. If I may say so, George Bush might need more study of the works of Michio Kaku, who's been our guest here. Now, I'm sorry we run right out of time. We'll go on talking at great length. It's a crucial time. It's your work and your kind of work that is we really need to understand. I appreciate in a small way that I've been able to allow the people to understand better these crises. We really do have to understand this much better, and it's through your work, and I want to thank you very much for all of that, and to thank you certainly for coming in and sharing some of your knowledge with us here.
My pleasure.
Yeah, it's been your pleasure. And the cable audience have the perception. Michio Kaku, he's at City CUNY here in New York. He's a nuclear physicist and a comprehensivist and a man of great concern, as you can see. Happy to have been able to share his potentially optimistic view of the world, although pointing out the negative possibilities that are current in the current existential situation we find ourselves in this holiday season of 1991. Happy to have been able to share them with